Kyle, and I got my buddy Carl here with me from the moon, and our man Crypto Rupert, and we're about to have a panel with these two, Didi from the Bitcoin family and Alessandra, and Carl's going to tell you what we're about to talk about.
Yeah, we will have an amazing discussion. We'll talk about the halving and the financial crisis, how Bitcoin will perform in the financial crisis, and why Bitcoin is unique and why Bitcoin is completely undervalued, and why people had to just wake up to the value of Bitcoin, and so much more in this panel.
And Rupert's favorite picks, too.
Yeah, and a few price predictions.
Yeah. Okay, thank you guys for joining us, or me, I should say. We got Didi from Bitcoin family, Carl, all the way from the moon, Alessandra. From where are you from, Alessandra? Tell us. Because I've had Carl and Didi here before, but you're a new guest. Mm-hmm. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and where you come from and what you've been up to in your professional career.
Of course, let's get to it. So the way that I got into the Bitcoin and crypto space was actually from a governance angle. So I used to write academic papers comparing global governance models across each other, and I used to always get the question, what's the best governance model you've seen out there? And I thought that was the wrong question, because there is no good or bad model. It's just a reflection of the values and the culture of each country, right? And out of that, and out of being in tech, having learned how to code back then, I was still at university, I was at Oxford, and I was investing, right, in normal markets. And so the cross-function of all these spaces like tech, finance, and then governance papers, right, went into reading the Satoshi paper. And it's been an interesting journey since then.
That was
in 2012. And so in 2014 and 15, I was actually in venture capital at a fund that was very early, like active in all the kind of Bitcoin investments at the time. We led the Series A of blockchain.com. We invested into Blockstream. So I've seen the space like grow and evolve a lot over time. And I'm excited about what's coming.
You invested in Blockstream?
Yes, we invested.
Is Adam back Satoshi? Is Adam Satoshi? No? Okay. Maybe. Carl, you're famous in crypto. Everybody knows you. But for those who don't, why don't you give us a little background?
Yeah, I'm one of the bigger YouTube personalities in crypto. I have 100,000 subscribers. I make one video every day about Bitcoin, about monetary policies, about economics, and basically anything that just comes to mind when I press record. I just talk about that, and I've been growing my subscribers for 2 years now, and everyone who's new to this channel, make sure to subscribe to Kyle.
Ooh, nice.
I believe in this channel. I'm very bullish. I see a clear uptrend in the subscribers and in the views. And I'm bullish for Kyle Chesse, so click subscribe.
Thank you.
But that's what I do.
Smash the bell too.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I travel under normal circumstances to conferences, and I speak. I take part in panels, and basically I talk about Bitcoin. That's my job. I love talking about Bitcoin, and that's why I made it my job. To also push my knowledge further, because when you teach, you push yourself to learn. Because you have to make sure that you know what you're talking about, right? And that's why I love my YouTube channel, because it pushes me every single day to research Bitcoin further and further. And I love my job.
Would you say that you're a Bitcoin maximalist?
From the normal accepted definition of the word, yes. Okay. For sure.
Cool. And what were you doing before Bitcoin and crypto on your YouTube channel?
Nothing special at all. I've always been very, very interested in monetary policies and the Federal Reserve System, the banking system. So that's something I've been researching for years, ever since 2011, 2012.
I think it's very actually inspiring to tell people what you were doing before, because a lot of people might look at your channel and see that you have 100,000 subscribers and now you're doing pretty well. You're financially free in a fairly short amount of time. But before Bitcoin, what were you doing?
Yeah, just a few years ago, I was a normal day worker in a grocery store.
Yeah.
And I didn't hate it. It was fine. I had great colleagues, and it was fine. But what I have now is just so much better, like astronomically better, because I can travel the world, I can do what I love, and what I do doesn't feel like a job. I just love making videos, and I love talking about Bitcoin. I love the Bitcoin price action, trading Bitcoin. All of this stuff is just perfect for me. So I'm super happy about that.
Cool. Didi, you're also famous. You have a pretty inspiring story.
Yeah.
Why don't you do a little introduction and
I will keep it short, okay?
Yeah.
I'll tell you the short version.
Yeah.
I'm just that crazy guy that decided like a few years ago to sell everything he had, the house, the companies, my cars, and all that stuff, and went all in Bitcoin with my family, 3 daughters, started traveling, living a digital nomad life. Already on the road now for 4 years, still living solely on crypto. We don't own bank accounts anymore, so we really know what it is to live with crypto and to spend crypto on a daily basis. Next to that, I'm the writer of 2 books now. I'm a keynote speaker. I'm asked more and more to speak about mindset as well, because people don't seem to understand that the goal in life is not accumulating wealth, but becoming happy. And accumulating wealth doesn't always lead to happiness at the end. So they're doing a lot of things. I'm still like the Bitcoin family, traveling as the Bitcoin family all over the world, and educating, preparing my own family for a beautiful decentralized future where crypto will rule the world, and preparing the rest of the world by leading by example. So I think you need to lead by example to show the world what they need to do, instead of just talking the talk. We are really walking the walk as a family, and that's what we're known for.
Cool. I actually was checking out your channel the other day, and I saw Jolie's video. I think that the title was like, what is it? Something about a teenager feels about Bitcoin, or explains Bitcoin to her class or whatever, or her friends. That was really interesting. Not only because seeing her perspective and her explain it to her peers, but also I got to check out the school that she was going to and how that worked, and it was so cool for me to be able to see. The whole conference set up, and then have like these kids from all over the world, clearly different nationalities, participating in this class where Julie was presenting the case for Bitcoin. Yeah. How did you guys go about finding that school, and what do you think about it?
The school found me. I was speaking in Mallorca on this beautiful event, and it was amazing. And then this guy came up to me and he said, "Didi, I heard your story, and you're traveling around with kids, but how do you handle schooling?" I said, we don't. We own school.
That was your answer last year when I asked you.
Yeah, we don't want to create these small robots, that just run around the hamster wheel and think that's life. And then he said, but we create this new school. It's called Galileo, and we just take it all the different way, and that we let the kids determine which subjects they want to learn, and then we just guide them through these subjects. And do you want to try it? I said, yeah, if you give it for free. I'm a freeloader. I always say want to have everything for free. I'm from Holland. We want everything for free. So we got it for free to school, and we tested it, and then the kids really loved it, because they get to connect with all children all over the world, and they just check in every day, like 30 minutes, and then this teacher takes them by the hand and guides them through the stuff, the mathematics or star science or whatever they want to learn,
Yeah.
And they just help them, and then the kids mingle with each other online using Zoom call.
Yeah.
And it really, we could really see the old one, Jolie, changing. Like, okay, now she's really interested in even star symbols, man. The normal kids of 14 don't look at star symbols. They don't look at meditation. They look at whatever, McDonald's and beautiful boys. I don't know. she's looking at beautiful boys, by the way. She's still single.
She's a teenager, yeah.
It's a teenager. But the school is amazing. And just another example, if you live the life, if you walk the walk, you run into these problems we face, and you need to solve them. And by solving them, you educate yourself, but also the kids.
Yeah.
The biggest problem for us now is that kids are not allowed to have a debit card. Mm-hmm. There is a debit card for everybody that has a Bitcoin wallet, and you can spend it using Wirex or whatever debit card out there, but it's all 18 plus. So, in my opinion, that's why I'm going to try to do in the next couple of months. I want to find a project that supports children having the ability to have an owner card where they can send their Bitcoins to. Because children have the future. This is how we all got into the banking system. Because when you were 12, you get a letter and you get a piggy bank, and 25 euros president of the bank, and you start to buy your first Nikes and you're chewing them. Uh-huh. That's how you get excited about your banking system and about the bank account. So now we need to get kids excited about Bitcoin. And we can only do it if we simplify the use of Bitcoin for children. They will be spending it in the future.
Yeah, agree. it's kind of hard to believe that the world is in such a lockdown right now. I mean, we're clearly practicing social distancing right now, right?
Yeah, we're hugging all the way up to it.
We're very fortunate here to be on an island where there is no known cases of corona, and therefore we get to kind of, for the most part, maintain life as normal. But back to the topic of Bitcoin, I think. Well, Carl, you'd be the person to know the best, since you happen to have a countdown. How far out are we from the halving? And for those who might have not the best idea, can you explain what it is and why it's relevant to Bitcoin?
Yeah, so the halving is coming closer and closer, and I talk about the halving very often on my channel because I think it is a very, very important event. Because especially now that this is the first halving that takes place during a financial crisis, we haven't seen that before, and I love the fact that we're seeing a huge divergence between Bitcoin and the rest of the financial markets, because looking at the banking system globally in the central banks, we're seeing quantitative easing in volumes that we've never seen before. We're seeing trillions and trillions of dollars and euros and other fiat currencies getting printed. And we've seen low interest rates for a very long time. We've seen a lot of quantitative easing, and Bitcoin is in fact kind of the opposite of that. Bitcoin during the halving will undergo something that I like to call quantitative hardening. It's the exact opposite. We're seeing the inflation go down rather than up, and I think that the fundamentals of Bitcoin will eventually just become undeniable to people that are losing value time over time because of the fact that they're holding fiat currencies. Inflation is a form of theft, of course, because every new dollar printed doesn't create any value. It just steals value from all the other units in circulation, and it would seem like the central bankers don't understand that, but I'm pretty sure they understand it. It's just that the situation now has just gone so far that they literally have no other choice now. I mean, they could either print money or they could not print money, and not printing money would lead to a massive deflationary crisis where potentially billions lose jobs and hundreds of millions of people could even die from it. Yeah. Looking at the previous Great Depression, we can see that these things can really turn into disaster, and that's why I think they are printing this much currency. And so back to the halving, I really think it's interesting to see the halving taking place now in the financial crisis, because I think more and more people will talk about Bitcoin as this new safe haven asset where you don't have to trust anyone. Because all these fiat currencies, you have to trust someone not to print currency, and history will tell you that governments tend to print currency into oblivion, and all fiat currencies eventually go back to their intrinsic value of zero. That is a bulletproof prediction, because that has always been the case. Thousands of fiat currencies throughout human history, they always go to zero, and the dollar will be no different. Yeah. And that's why Bitcoin is a perfect alternative.
So, Alessandra, you are you're an investor in the space, and you also work with a lot of capital and other investors and things like that. Is it predominantly in crypto and blockchain, or is it other markets as well?
There's a lot of movement and big changes happening right now across most asset categories. I think that also there is a broader kind of macro event taking place where you see institutional investors waking up to the fact that this is not just a fancy derivative in the way that it gets treated, right? And what I mean by that is that BTC by large institutional players has been treated in a way that means, I want to diversify into new asset classes that I don't quite understand, and I'm just not going to allocate a little bit into that, right? So that's what's been happening, and that's what eventually has started shaping the market as well, because the market is very tiny. It still is, and it was even tinier a few years ago, right? Yeah. It's been so small, and it's been growing a lot, but still it's very, very manipulation friendly. I don't even mean it gets manipulated on purpose, right? I don't actually think that it's too much of the case. It's more individual players running their own games, right? But what's been happening is and I'm seeing it with my network across the space, is institutionals are realizing that this is a store of value, right? So what you're seeing happening is a shift that becomes a big part of what now is the market for BTC, is starting to treat it very differently. It's starting to get educated, right? Because the education was so basic until recently. But now people and institutional players are looking for alternatives that are real assets, right? And when you look out for real assets, like what you have oil, which has gone negative right now. You've got a couple of other choices, and BTC, quite frankly, I mean, we're kind of biased here. I think it's the best one right now. I think it's got like so much potential going forward, and I'm seeing that shift. I'm seeing the education starting to happen, and that's an exciting moment to go through.
So, where I think there's a lot of discussion about. There's a lot of discussion about correlation versus non-correlation traditional markets, right? A lot of people say Bitcoin is an asymmetric or non-correlated asset to, traditional finance 1.0. However, on March 12th, we saw a huge correlation, and I think that a lot of people, this is an argument that goes back and forth, right? And so, like, what do you guys think? Because it's important that people understand, what Bitcoin is in relationship to other investment vehicles, and I'm not so sure right now. In the interim, I've seen a very, very strong correlation. It seems like every time the markets take a big dip, so does a crypto market, right? And so, do you guys think that that's going to go on for a long time, or is it temporary, or?
I'll jump in because this is exactly my point. My point is that it's starting to shift, right? So I think that if anything, BTC has behaved. So the reason I call it a fancy derivative is because derivatives move even more when the market moves, right? Like they're highly sensitive. Whereas store of values or gold, for example, like are negatively correlated, right? Now we've seen BTC moving with the market. I think this is going to start to change. Why? Because this education is taking place. Yeah. So that's what I think is going to happen.
I think it depends a little bit as well, because if you have been longer in this space, and we started as a revolution, we were all hardcore people that believed in a new form of peer-to-peer cash that was going to disrupt the monetary system. And now we see ourselves in the same space, and now we see that 99% of the people are in the space to accumulate wealth and just to trade it. So, and if it comes to the markets all depend on psychology. So I think it's logic that the Bitcoin moves around with other markets, because it's all the fear that people are selling, or all the euphoria that they are buying, but probably mostly the wrong way. So I think that is the problem we're running into. If we would have a more still true fundamental believing revolutionary people in this space, I think it would be easier to disconnect from these traditional markets, because that's what we want. But because biggest part of the space is now not in there for the true fundamentals of Bitcoin anymore. I think that's why you see the correlation.
I think that the correlation with other markets has been much more relevant now in the past few weeks and months because of the big financial crisis. I think this was not the case as much just like a few months ago before the crisis. And the reason for that is just because of like when people get fearful, when people lose money in the stock markets, they have to cover the losses by selling other assets that they hold, and it's very rarely a choice in that case. It's more like you have to sell these assets to cover losses in this other asset. When these brokerage come, they come with these like margin calls, and you have to put up the collateral. So that's why I think in the crisis you see this correlation between everything. Even
which crisis are you talking about?
The financial crisis.
And is that because of this alleged COVID situation, or is it what is causing this crisis?
Usually, what I say is, I've been talking about this financial crisis for years, because it's something that has been inevitable and something that needs to come eventually. Because low interest rates and cheap credit eventually has to end in a popping of the bubble that builds up due to this. And the crisis started way before Corona. We saw the repo crisis start like maybe even a year before Corona came, and we clearly saw that the fundamentals were way off, and something had to pop this bubble eventually. Corona very conveniently came and popped this bubble.
Very conveniently.
Yeah,
What do you think?
He says it really polite.
Yeah, and I mean, first in the first weeks, I referenced Corona as the pin to pop the bubble, but it later became evident that it's more like a bazooka or like a big hammer popping the bubble, because not maybe the virus in and of itself, but all of the political decisions, closing everything down, keeping people inside. So the political decisions that has been the big bazooka to the economy, and And
can I interrupt you for a second? Because you're from Sweden, are you?
Yep.
So, but the political decisions in Sweden, they were like completely different than the rest of the world, and they show the most positive figures. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so currently it seems like the curve is flattening out in Sweden, and Sweden has been the most relaxed country in the world. Everything is open, gyms are open, schools are open, borders are open, so
that says in real life, it says like it's not different than a normal flu. It's like just the curve would always be flattening. Flattening is not decreasing the amount of people that have the flu, but it's just flattening it out, nothing else.
Did you guys see the
Sorry, I interrupted, but I'm curious because you're from Sweden.
Yeah, like personally, I'm not a doctor, so I can't really comment on it. But for sure, I think the political decisions have been an overreaction. And when you compare like the threat of the virus, no matter if you believe the like what the death rate or whatever, but no matter how you view that, if you compare the virus the threat and the financial threats, when you just completely shut down the economy, then
that's overreacting.
Not to mention the massive debt bubble that there is below this. Like you should tread light and tread like because something could really go wrong.
Did you guys see the White House hot mic clip?
No,
I saw a part of it. Yeah,
it's only 15 seconds long or something, but basically, for if you haven't seen it, it's basically the camera's rolling before I guess Trump's supposed to do something like that or whatever, and one of the photographers from New York Times is in the front row with a mask on, and one of the cabinet staff walks out and he goes, you can take your mask off, like you can take your mask off. He goes, yeah, there was a new study that just came out, like there's less than a 0.01% mortality rate. And the guy goes, oh yeah, well we've all been vaccinated anyway, right? And then the guy walks off and he's like, oh, tell me about the study, whatever. He's like, yeah, in California there's whatever the case may be, but this is some video that was rolling in the White House beforehand, and so this is something that's been going around crazy right now. And like as soon as the coronavirus started, I thought it was incredibly convenient, one, it was apparently started in China, and two, before Chinese New Year, and three, that like they traveled all over the place, but also correlating to the fact that we were approaching this economic crisis beforehand. But it seems to be a lot less severe. And another thing that doesn't make sense to me, and you guys chime in on this, but like, with the United States closing down the economy, you have to think about how it apparently spread, right? So if it apparently started in Wuhan and it went from a couple people who had reported to then it spread out more and more and more. It just started with one person eating a bat or something, like however they claim, right? And then that one person went to 2 went to 4 went to 8. So then you look at the United States, who closes down the entire country for a couple months. Economy goes to crap. 25 million people unemployed, and now they're talking about reopening it when you're still seeing new cases pop up every day. So what good would it do to reopen the economy if there's still people who are getting sick?
But that's exactly what all governments are doing. They rushed into this fear model of a virus that was spreading because they didn't know. But they did never think about the exit strategy, because any flu what we saw in the past, every government planned an exit strategy. How do you exit? When do you send kids to school again? Which kids do we send to school again? In Holland, they said, no, the kids till 12, let's test them. Let's send them to school. If they get sick, well, then nobody gets to go to school. So they use children now like as a test case. I watched this beautiful thing today of a Swedish doctor. I'm not a doctor as well, but the Swedish doctor, he was the advisor for the World Health Organization for years, the Swedish governments, all those governments, and also with the states. And he said, guys, you're all talking too much. In the flu, in any pandemic, you zoom out. And if you zoom out and you look at the amount of death of that whole year, then you see there will not more death than normally. Because people that now die of the flu, that would maybe also have died of cancer or whatever other disease. So if you look, and that's what I miss now in this crypto space, because I am fighting on Twitter with like huge influencers in crypto, because now they support the government again. I'm like, oh my God, you tell everybody to zoom out on the market and look at the big movement and on the small, but you're not able to zoom out on this thing, what is happening all around the world. That's what I'm getting confused by this.
It is, the whole thing is incredibly confusing to me. Like
But it will crash the market. It's an accelerator for the market that was already crashing since 2009.
That's what I'm confused. That's what I'm confused about the most, right? And like Alessandra, I asked you about this, but before, like, why, if we have 25 million unemployed, and everything, and if you look at news from America and things like that, people are miles long line for food, and nobody has a job. Like, I think in California, 1 in 4 are unemployed, and $1,200 isn't enough to survive off of. I think the number from the federal stimulus, less than 0.03% of the stimulus went to actual people. Like, the rest went to big businesses, which is a whole nother topic to discuss. Yeah. But can you explain to me, like, why the stock markets or markets are rallying so much, or doing well, when the entire underlying economy is going to shit?
I mean, first of all, we need to zoom back, to use your words, and think about what's happening with the fiat that is underlying these markets, right? Because we have QE going on, like there's no tomorrow, there's going to be much more of it coming. I love what you were talking about before, like every currency historically, when you look at it, trends to zero. And so I think that what's actually going to happen with equity markets, like, is this rebalancing function, right? Where you've got more QE coming in, and therefore, even if the nominal values, because this is the thing, remember, it's nominal values, right? It doesn't actually mean that the intrinsic value, you've got a giant bag right over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, leave him some space.
Okay,
don't push him away. Nominal values can be very deceptive. Right, and so I think what's going to happen is that even if the nominal value either stays the same or rallies, right, like we've seen, that is not an indicator of the actual value, right? Because you're rebalancing it out, and so I think it's very, very tricky right now to just draw conclusions from what the markets are doing.
That's a good point, and to the nominal value point, I think that's also a very good point, because just a very great example of that. If you look at the gold price, it looks like the gold price is close to all-time highs. And it looks like the gold price is much higher now than back in the 80s. But if you adjust for inflation, you will see that back in the 80s, the gold price was in a huge bubble, really, and we've deflated massively from then. And if gold were to come back to those highs, then gold has to come back to $9,000 to that high. But in nominal terms, I think the gold price topped out. I don't remember, but it was significantly lower than that. The fiat system surely skews the numbers and makes it actually extremely hard to measure anything. It's just like having these things that you measure things with when you build things. Imagine that being floating and that's moving all the time.
I know what you're measuring of it.
How would that, or my watch just going in circles and just floating, it wouldn't make any sense. Fiat is like that. You can't measure value with something that's just floating and going crazy.
Yeah.
But is it going to lead to this? Do you think that because of the quantitative easing and all stuff that they will be forced to accept this new digital blockchain currency, but then the digital dollar? And then is that how they are going to trick us again then by creating their own centralized cryptocurrency that they can again print as much as they want? What do you think?
Yeah, we should always expect governments to continue creating new fiat currencies. There's no point for them to start going back to any gold standard. That would be a huge deflationary event because you've diluted the value and stolen purchasing power from gold and just diluted it into this fiat system. So to go back to the gold standard, that's not an option at this point. I mean, it would be reasonable to do that maybe 30, 45, 50 years ago. You should never have gone off of the gold standard in the first place back in 71. So I think the system is doomed to fail eventually. There will be an alternative. That's inevitable because
Bitcoin was created in essence to be a replacement for the gold standard, I feel like.
Yeah, and I believe in the Bitcoin standard more than in the gold standard because today we have a digital world. We need digital payments. The whole infrastructure is built on it. So to have an underlying infrastructure that is digital and still decentralized and unprintable and all of that good stuff. Bitcoin is literally made for being a world reserve currency, and it's perfect for that.
You think Peter Schiff agrees?
Peter Schiff does not agree at all.
No.
But I don't know. I see a potential for Bitcoin to become the new world reserve.
Do you think Peter Schiff is just a little bit envious, maybe, because he missed the opportunity to get on the boat early?
He's a very intelligent man, and I've been following him for years. Long before I went into Bitcoin, I was following Peter Schiff and his macroeconomics outlook. He's a very, very intelligent man. I think he's very emotional. He missed the boat, and now he's just clouded by emotions, and that's fine because that happens to people. Or he's using this as a marketing thing, because if you look at his Twitter, he's one of the biggest Bitcoin influencers, maybe the biggest, based on the spread and the impressions that he gets from his tweets. So he's, if you measure only from a impression standpoint, like a engagement standpoint, he's doing very well. So he has found something where he can talk about Bitcoin and make money from that, and he is just taking the side of the bears and just realized that it's a potential for him.
So bringing it back to governments. I am extremely disappointed by the way that everything's being handled right now. You know, we have trillions of dollars going out into bailouts, and it's predominantly going to very large corporations, right? So you have these huge corporations. A lot of them are like S&P 500 companies, which are supposed to be the top 500 companies in the world, and they lose business and they're making, by the way, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars a year in profit. And they start losing out on revenue for 1 month, 2 months maybe, and all of a sudden they're at risk of going under, right? I think there's a very big problem with that. And all of a sudden they expect us or taxpayers to bail them out, right? Because ultimately, where do you think these trillions of dollars are going to come from? Because, I mean, yeah, they're printed out of thin air, but they're going to be built back into the taxpayers. So these CEOs, or the people who are allocating, you know, the wealth that they bring in, they get to keep all of their profits, all of their stocks that they've bought from stock buybacks, and they get to still stay in business, even though they didn't properly plan or prepare or come out of their pocket to maintain their employees.
What we are seeing has turned into it's socialism for the rich, and it's capitalism for the poor, where, like you're saying, the companies, they get all of these bailouts, and eventually we will see the banking system get trillions of dollars in bailouts as soon as all of this, the credit crunch ultimately leads into the banks, because it is the banks that lend out the currency. And this $1,200 handout that American citizens got, I think this is also just like a diversion, just keep people from not starting a revolution, because a $1,200 handout, like, that's nothing. That won't help these people that lost their jobs. And I'm not sure exactly about the numbers, but I think if you look at the total value printed and given out, citizens got like a few percent of this. The rest went to companies.
I think it's less. I think so. A statistic I think was on Chamath's his Twitter. I believe it was 0.03% of every dollar, or 0.03 cents of every dollar goes to the actual people.
In that case, it's obvious that it's just a cheap way to pay off the citizens to not start a revolution while they continue to print money for the big companies. And even if they start giving people $2,000 a month or whatever, I mean, universal basic income, no matter what, I mean, this money, currency printing, it will end in a huge hyperinflation eventually. You can't just print currency and expect that to solve the problem. Printing currency can never solve any problem, ever. And I see a big disaster coming in the next few years.
I think your question actually gets us into the problem, the fundamental failure of our economic and political systems to deal with collective value in the best way possible for everybody, right? For all stakeholders in a way that optimizes the entire system, right? We don't have that. So you have companies from the past and companies from the future. One of my businesses is a network of investors, impact investors and sustainability investors and entrepreneurs. And what you observe in there is that actually some of the main investment trends of this decade and beyond are actually all about sustainability. Why? Because it's become more profitable to be part of the solution than to be part of the problem. However, in the current system that you've got of lobbying, right, like in politics, that shift hasn't quite happened yet. So you've got the past, like companies from the past, still having a very loud voice. And I think that this is now happening like all across the board, right? But what we're seeing with these bailouts is a perfect example of that system being fully in place, fully working. And I think it also gets us back to distributed systems, governance innovation, right? Which our space is all about, and how much it's needed today.
Didi, I know that that you're a big fan of Tron.
Why?
Justin's son, it's one of your heroes, right?
Yeah, it is. No.
Yeah.
I'm not a maximalist on any currency.
No, it's just kidding. Yeah, so I guess I'd like to kind of just start wrapping it up, but I think I'd like to just kind of get just some theories about where we're going here for traditional markets. Like, when do you think things will go back to normal? What do you think the Bitcoin price will be at the end of the year? Let's start with those three things, and we could just move down the line.
When are we going to go back to normal? I think normal depends on how many sheeple we have on this world, because if there are too many sheeple, then this is the new normal. Like I said in the video a few days ago, I really hope that people realize that they are giving up all their freedom and human rights at the moment for something which is, in my opinion, going to be a hoax if we zoom out in a year time, and then we will see that it was just another flu and that we destroyed a lot of businesses and a lot of people's dreams as well, because a business is not only about money, it's also about the people. Somebody's behind the business and he had a dream.
It's their baby.
And it's his passion. And if you need to kill your baby or your parent, you feel pain. Yeah. So these people will have tremendous problems. So I think Bitcoin sadly will still be correlated a little bit to the market. So I think when the market will go down, I think Bitcoin will go down as well. Because, in my opinion, what I see in the community is that we have too many sheeple. Yeah. So not revolutionary people. I just answered on Carl's tweet yesterday, revolution with a fist, because I love the tweet you made, and I think we need to make a revolution. I think we need to wake up and a peaceful revolution. And I'm not talking about war and all that stuff, but I think we need to start using the blockchain for what it is. We need to start a decentralized voting system. Why do we need all the layers in companies, all the layers in governments, when we can just ask us a question and through a beautiful blockchain app that's already been developed by a few companies, and we now get an Amber Alert when somebody is missing. Just send me a tweet with a question and we all vote as the people of the country, and then you have the solution what you need to do as a government. So I think we need to embrace blockchain and cryptocurrency, and then I think the future will be very, very bright for all of us, and fuck the governments.
Yeah. Amen.
I love the smile at the end.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin is a revolution in and of itself.
It is in my opinion.
Just using Bitcoin, you're basically starting a revolution, because it's an alternative to the current system.
Yeah.
So, and that is a peaceful revolution. It's just using a better form of money than the money that the government provides. So,
yeah, it is.
Carl?
What was the specific question?
When
I forgot them as well. That's why I just rambled on.
I also forgot them.
The point
Can we just rewind for a minute? It was. What do you? When do you think things will go back to normal?
That one I answered.
So what do you think is going to happen with traditional markets, I guess, and what is the price of Bitcoin at the end of the year?
So, first of all, before the 2008 financial crisis, many people saw that coming, and they called for a huge crisis. And these people, most of them, called for the biggest depression ever, the biggest calamity ever. And they were right However, the central bankers, they were able to kick the can down the road another 10 years, even more than 10 years, by lowering interest rates, printing a bunch of currency, injecting that into the system, and by doing so, pushing it into the future, but also just creating a bigger problem. This is the same scenario we have now. They could, of course, just lower interest rates down to -0, -4, -5. This is possible. We've seen that globally. We've seen Sweden, for example. I think Japan, Denmark, like a handful of countries have tried negative interest rates, and it's an absurd idea. But in the short term, it could temporarily re-inflate the bubble. The big question is, will they be successful or not? And I don't know. No one knows, and not even the central bankers know. I mean, I think they're just... I don't know if they know what they're doing, because if they don't know, then this all makes sense. But if they actually do know what they're doing, then it's just very evil that they're actually pushing people into this system and just... but yeah, so let's see. It's possible that they prolong this another 15 years, and in that case, it's possible that everything just goes back to normal in 2 years when the stock markets are back, and yeah, but eventually Big Mac will cost us $200, and houses will cost $3 trillion, and we will end up in a hyperinflation eventually, I think, because all this currency that gets printed, even though people are not spending it right now, eventually all of these units of currencies will come out from hiding, and eventually it will just...
So we will get the same situation as Venezuela, where we go to the stores with a big car full with money, and then just go bring
this is
or you wipe your ass with the money because it's cheaper than the toilet paper.
Yeah, this is very, very possible. It's very much possible.
Or central bank digital dollars need to be on... We need to make our phones wider to fit the number of digits in the screen.
Yeah. So, I mean, everything could go back to normal soon, but... and looking at Bitcoin, no matter what, I think Bitcoin will go up in value. It will for sure go up in price with all these trillions of dollars getting printed, but we have to differentiate between price and value, because that will increasingly become important to differentiate between, because just like we talked about earlier with nominal prices and value, it's...
If we're buying a Big Mac for $300, then I guess if Bitcoin is at 20,000, doesn't mean much, does it?
Exactly. So we have to measure how much does a Bitcoin buy in terms of assets, and in terms of what can you buy for a Bitcoin? And but I see a future very soon where you can buy a home for $1 Bitcoin. Whether a home is $5 quadrillion or $100,000, that remains to be seen. But I believe in Bitcoin fundamentally, and I think Bitcoin in the next big hype cycle will go to somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000 measured in today's money, and eventually I think Bitcoin can go as high as $5 million measured in today's money, adjusted for inflation, because I really believe that Bitcoin is the best form of money in the world, especially as soon as we see secondary solutions get implemented. At that point, Bitcoin is the best form of money in the world, and eventually I think people will... there's a law, I think, was it Gresham's law, where people spend bad money and they keep good money. Like back in the old days when they diluted the coinage, which was previously silver and gold, they diluted it with copper. Eventually people saved the silver and gold coins and spent the bad money. I think the same kind of phenomenon could happen where people save Bitcoin. I mean, all of us, we don't really spend our Bitcoin, we save our Bitcoin. We only spend if we really have to. But fiat, I'm more than willing to just spend, because I know it will be less valuable in the future, and that is the phenomenon that I think, and I think it will naturally happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's going to be a going back to normal, and I hope that there is not going to be a going back to normal, because I strongly believe our systems really need a full-on upgrade. And this feels like the kind of push that we were really needing one way or the other to start tackling tougher questions. I'm hearing a lot of talks about stakeholder capitalism, Swedish model. I'm hearing a lot of that. And I think that actually, having observed these discussions for several years, they're being accelerated more than ever before. I do see how eventually on this path, those discussions can go into discussions about distributed models. Again, I think that it's a function of evolution. I think it's more efficient. I think that at this point we also have the technology for it. I mean, you don't need to look at what we have just in this space. Like, look at nature, look at our DNA, it's distributed. Like, distribution, when you can actually operate it within the system, so you have the architecture and you have the technology for it, is more efficient. And so I actually hope that there is no going back to normal anymore, because we've started this path, we've kickstarted it, and the changes are going to compound. So that's what I'm seeing, the early phases of that, and I hope it trends that way.
Cool. All right, guys, thank you. Appreciate it.
Go down and click the like button and subscribe to Kyle.
Yes.
Thanks for reminding everybody. Appreciate it, Carl.
Hit the bell.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Cool. That was an amazing panel right there.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Dale, what are you cooking? What did you cook
Yeah,
tonight?
let me introduce the food. So you're gonna make this by super spicy. Yeah. We have the most spicy one is fish shrimp with pineapple sauce, and then it's a panang fish and shrimp, medium spicy. Egg salad is a bit spicy, and garlic and pepper sauce and egg. Spicy. A little bit white pepper. This one panang is panang chicken.